Willkommen beim Meilencoach. Heute habe ich die Ehre, den Mann zu interviewen, der am häufigsten mit der Concorde geflogen ist und wahrscheinlich überhaupt die meisten Meilen unter allen Vielfliegern gesammelt hat. Da gibt es jetzt ganz tolle Einblicke in die Welt der Concorde, die besonderen Begegnungen, die ihm dort widerfahren sind und wie er als Supervielflieger die verschiedenen Airlines sieht. Natürlich auch die Lufthansa. Und er verrät uns seine Tricks, wie er ein Upgrade bekommt. Das wird super spannend und unterhaltsam. Freut euch auf das exklusive Gespräch mit Fred Finn. Da Fred Brite ist, werde ich das Interview auf Englisch führen. Viel Spaß und gute Unterhaltung. Hi Fred, so good having you. Thank you very much for your time for this exclusive interview on my YouTube channel, Mileage Coach. Great to have you.
And I'm very delighted to be with you, Oliver.
I'm very honored, really. Fred, in your latest book, Sonic Boom, we could learn that you have flown 718 times the Concorde over the span of its 27 years of service. How come that you flew that often on this special aircraft?
Well, it was actually a tool. But despite what people say about elitists, it was for billionaires and millionaires. I'm neither of that. I'm not elitist. I'm not a billionaire, and I don't own AT&T or Mercedes. So I could leave the States where I was living, and my work took me mainly to developing and third world countries. I could leave New York at 10 o'clock in the morning, land in London at 6, and connect with a connecting flight to Nairobi the same day. So that saved me 24 hours. Now, my company, they weren't doing me a favor by letting me, working for an American company, flying on a British supersonic jet. They got me an extra 24 hours out of me by using Concorde, because in London or anywhere I'd have to go through Europe. I'd have to go out to a hotel. That includes a limousine, a car, and check back in. And then no matter what could happen in between time. So it did save 24 hours. And for me, it was more healthy because I spent less time traveling and more time working. So that's why I used Concorde. And eventually, of course, by the time 1987 came around, I flew on the inaugural flight of Concorde from Washington, D.C. to London on the 25th of May, 1976. By the time 1987 came around, I had gone from being an international licensing expert to a travel and tourism guy, because the amount of times I flew on Concorde provoked interest. So I was writing business trips and travel tips, how to fly for Executive Travel magazine, appearing in photographs all over the world, because who is this guy who's flying on Concorde so much? It piqued a lot of interest. So in a nutshell, that's why I used it as a tool. Then, of course, my business continued, but it was a lot to do. It went more onto tourism. I was invited to countries. Okay. And they paid me to go there or paid me to work for them. So I was now getting paid for something I love to do.
Right.
And I could still use Concorde. So, yeah.
Okay. So, and did you really fly on Concorde in its whole lifetime? So they all 27 years were you flying with it? Or was it like
more or less I did, yeah.
More or less,
yes.
Okay.
I didn't fly on the last flight. I spent the whole day and night on Sky News, welcoming these flights coming back and talking to the crews as they were coming in and landing. You know, it was more interesting for me to celebrate that way, than to be miserable over it the other way.
Okay.
So yes, I did. I'm still part of it. Yeah. I'm still going to Concorde weddings, funerals, captains' wives' funerals. It's still. I did a book launch under the wing of Concorde in Bristol the other night. I did a book launch a little earlier on in Manchester under the wing of Concorde. I do talks under the wing of Concorde, or as people would say, a glass of red with Fred. Under the wing of Concorde. I do a lot of talks with Concorde.
Concorde, even though it's not used, it's still somehow alive, and people.
It definitely is alive. an engineering masterpiece.
Yeah.
So it's about now innovating young engineers and young pilots by talking to them about it, because it still looks like it's built to fly tomorrow.
It still looks modern. It's true. It's true.
It's a beautiful engineering piece. It's marvelous. Yeah.
What I found funny and somehow curious was that you always took the same seat, 9A. Why?
Well, it wasn't by choice. The first time I flew, they put me in that seat. Now, I didn't know what the seating was. It just happened to be the last seat but one from the back, 10 seats in the front. So there was 40 people in the front and 60 in the back. Okay. But I then realized when I went to take it the next flight, they gave me seat 9A again. So very soon, seat 9A became my seat. But I did realize that I actually got served from the back first.
Okay.
So it was quite nice. I got my drinks, although later on in the briefing to the crew, they would say, Fred is with us today. And Don Perignon would be under the seat in front of me, chilled, before I got on board. So there was a lot of privileges to it, yes. Because I was part of that family, I knew all the crew. I played cricket for Concorde. I filled in for captains and doing talks at various functions, and I talked about kinetic friction on the QE2, because you could go one way on the QE2 and one way on Concorde for about half the price of a Concorde ticket. Wow.
Yeah. What I found fascinating was that you wrote that you met on the Concorde really very famous people, super VIPs like Richard Branson, Phil Collins, Mikhail Gorbachev, Princess Di.
Yeah.
And you became somehow acquainted or even friends with them. How did you manage? How did that happen? I mean,
everybody on Concorde was seen to be equal and supposed to be there. It was never questioned. I mean, I would talk to Paul McCartney and he would talk to me. He used to sign happy faces and send them around, yeah. Muhammad Ali, he would talk to people. Joan Rivers, she was quite famous, and she was reaching in a bag to find me what you looking for, a photograph to give you. She said, I said, I'll bring one, and next time I see you. And about 3 months later, I saw her again, and she gave me a photograph signed. Johnny Cash, I made a good friend of John, and we used to go out to dinner in New York. We used to fly up from Nashville. I used to live in Nashville for a couple of years, and we'd fly up to New York and go out for dinner together. So it just developed.
Somehow created a special atmosphere that you said, like, people all felt like a family or a group of friends. Or
exactly right.
Equal, as you said.
Exactly right.
But I think there's no space anywhere else where people feel like this. Perhaps in, I don't know.
No space ever. There's been like that. No, there is no space like that before or after, because we're all there flying somewhere. But it was a very unique club.
Yeah.
The people, I'd have, like, the guy who owned the TV channels at the time, Lou Gray. He used to smoke cigars like a tree, and he'd offer me one. And I said, I'm not old enough to smoke one of those, but they did give out cigars on Concorde. If you were going to New York, it would be a Macanudo, because they wouldn't allow Cubans to go into New York.
Yeah.
And if you went to Singapore and Bahrain, it was Cubans. But they used to snip it for you. I used to dip it in my cognac and have a cigar occasionally. Of course, not now. But a lot of times, because they knew me, they'd sell my seat. So I had the unfortunate experience, if it was any other aeroplane, to fly on the flight deck. And 30% of my flights, I sat in the jump seat with a headset on, like I've got now, and talked to the captain. That debated them from not having to say no to anybody, because I was there for the whole flight. I did say to the officials at British Airways, have you told the captain I'm going to be in his office today? Because I still want my red wine and my Dom Perignon. And I said, because I'm not going to give you my seat unless I can have that. So yes, I was allowed to have my meal and my drink.
That,
But
that
most
leads somehow to my next question, because you not only met these super VIPs, you became somehow friends as well with pilots and crew members. I mean,
yes, I did.
I fly a lot, and I've never met a pilot. And crew members, okay, friendly talks, but not that I would meet them afterwards. So was that
Well, because I flew so much that I was invited to the flight deck.
okay?
And what are you doing? Why don't we go and have a drink? You see, again, you're talking about a very small fleet. There were less
How many were there?
pilots
How many
than there
were
were astronauts.
there?
So that's used to happen. In fact, we're talking about how we knew each other. I would be sitting there with my hat on, and the captain who was flying me that day said, "Would you like to talk to your friend David? He's coming the other way." So I talked to Concorde coming the other way at a closing speed of 46 miles a minute. And I said, "Is it because they go like this, passing each other, does it cut out the speed of sound?" So then I could hear each other. "Oh, no, Fred, the speed of sound travels at the speed of light." And I've been confused ever since, but at least I had that conversation. And the other thing you could see, you'd overtake a 747 and it looked like it was flying backwards. I mean, it was.
You mean a 747 at least flies at a speed of 900K as well? Like,
Yeah.
slow, but compared to Mach 2, it's of course slow. So
Can I just say something to you? How to say about Concorde. I was asked to invite a celebrity or somebody famous to a cocktail party at Kennedy Airport and a flight up to Pittsburgh to show Concorde off, okay? So I invited the president of the bank. So I'm in London and I go to check in and they said, "You're late." I said, "I'm never late." The flight had pushed back. I said, "Well, you better tell the captain because I need to be on that flight. I'm a special guest at this reception. I've got to go up and do a talk in Pittsburgh about Concorde." So they called the captain. The captain was John Cook. He said, "Who is it?" "Fred." "Oh, Fred, tell him to leave his bag for the 747 and run." So another guy said, "Could he come with me?" I said, "If you can keep up." He didn't. They took me out in a truck. There was a plane, pulled over on the taxiway. I ran up the ladder and it bum all the way to New York, but I made it. Then we went to Pittsburgh. We did 3 flybys, had lunch, talked with the mayor, and flew back to Kennedy. Probably took about 5 hours, yeah? I went into the baggage hall to collect my bag because the 747 had just landed that took off at about the same time. And the guy I was supposed to run with, he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry you didn't make it." He said, "I did, and this is what I did." And that's how Concorde was.
Amazing, yeah.
It had another phenomenon. If you flew now at this time of the year west, you flew faster than rotation of the Earth, and sun came up from the west, and you landed in daylight. I could see the sun coming up from the west. It's a most weird feeling, but it did.
Weird. Yeah, extremely weird. Wow. So how was it flying at Mach 2? Was it extremely noisy? And you mentioned as well that Concorde was flying higher than any other airplane. What were
it was one of the most comfortable airplanes for flying in because you were above turbulence. Concorde used to fly with afterburners to take off, and when it got over the sea, it would go from 0.99 to 1.7 and turn them off. At this point, Concorde was what it called super cruise. It was the most efficient airplane on the planet then because it was where it belonged. And it was climbing freely from 39,000 to 60,000 feet. That's about 20,000 meters. But it always at a slight angle as it burned off fuel. So you could see the curvature of the Earth.
Wow.
You could see space because after you look at it, it was black. Wow. So you were right on the. In fact, NASA says if over 55,000 feet or 50, you're an astronaut. So I'm an astronaut already, or an astronaut, whatever way you want to put it. But this plane, when it went supersonic, I've heard people say they could feel it, they could do this. If I touch my shoulder like this, then you know what? Just like that, it wouldn't even spill my champagne. In fact, I should suggest when you took off, you knew it was different because it was like sitting in a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or a Jaguar. The seats were contoured and comfortable, and your feet went right underneath the next seat. And you could hear things, but when you were taxiing, as they switched on the air conditioning, you got a whiff of aviation fluid as well, as though it wasn't high adrenaline enough. You got this whiff. It was fantastic, but you could feel it taxiing because it was a sports car of airplanes. Yeah,
Amazing.
it was sensational to fly in. It was so comfortable, but it
And
never had a drink spill.
Was it very noisy or not really?
I think towards the back it was probably a bit noisier.
Yeah.
Again, if you ride in a nice sports car that's got a nice exhaust,
Yeah.
you like the sound.
Okay.
And people like the sound. People used to come out of their houses to watch this noise, you know.
Yeah.
It was a sound that you got used to.
Okay.
Sitting in board, it wasn't absolutely noisy, no. It was noisier than a 747,
Yeah.
but it wasn't uncomfortable. I mean, many times I've announced I'm on the flight. If I'd done 100 flight or 200 or 300 or 400, they would announce I was on the flight. Or there was no movies, of course.
Oh,
You
no.
didn't have,
No, at that time.
no time.
No
By the
time.
time you got airborne, got your drinks, and got the most amazing food,
Yeah.
and after dinner drinks,
I wanted to ask
it
you
was
about
gone.
the service on board and before in the lounges. Was that very special? Did that come
Yes, it was.
to first class of British Airways or Air France today, or was it
No, above.
spectacular?
It's on a class of its own. First off, you had your own special check-in. Security was right there. You didn't have to go anywhere. It was there. And they took your coat. If you had a winter coat, they would take your coat then and hang it on the rack and wheel it on the aircraft.
Yeah.
So they didn't have to worry about hanging it up when you got there. So it was already done. And that was it. And you in the lounge, you could phone anywhere in the world. The phones were there for you to use.
So there was a phone you could just use and
You
call.
could use call anywhere you want,
Okay.
drink anything you want, order anything you want. It was there.
And
Very special.
very special.
Just standing in the Concorde line sometimes there's enough where the people from first class could see you down there, and they were very envious, you know, that you were getting on Concorde. But then arriving, you got special clearance. I just can't tell you. 2 hours and 55 minutes is the first fastest I've crossed the Atlantic from New York to London.
3 hours. 250.
Under 3 hours. Under 3. There's only 2 flights that did that.
So that's why there was no entertainment, because you were entertained by drinks, have a nice meal,
Yeah.
and chatting to VIPs.
Yeah. Well, you know, actually, of course,
Could you walk around?
it was almost too short.
Yeah.
It was so good, the service, and you were so enjoying it. It was too short.
Yeah.
Well, I had an arrangement with the crew here in London. When I arrived in London, I used to take the bottles off for them, you know, because if a bottle was open, they could buy it for 50 pence. Well, of course, they were all open, yeah. So I could get 10 bottles into my briefcase, and I could go through customs with it because it was open. So we'd all meet in a pub for a drink, and I'd hand over the bottles for them. They do the same for me in New York.
Yeah.
It was an amazing club.
Yeah.
The amazing people.
Wow.
I mean, really special people. I flew on Christmas Day once, not from England because British Airways did not used to fly. So I had to go on Air France. Air France challenged me so many times to fly with them and a night in Paris. And I didn't because I took Concorde because it was the time that was valuable to me. But on Christmas Day, I did. And there were 3 people on the flight. We're getting across and the guy sitting with us, the 3 of us in the front, he said, I'll take my guitar out and play a bit, shall I? Oh, yes. And he played Country Road. And yes, it was John Denver.
No way. Amazing.
Yeah. That's the sort of stuff that went on.
So could you walk around in the airplane?
Yes.
So
People
it
did.
was not like super strict like nowadays that you have to
It
be
was,
knuckled
it
up.
was like absolutely. It's like the club. You probably more so on Concorde because you knew somebody. So he'd, well, how are you doing? It was that a lot of regulars on Concorde. And I always knew somebody, but of course I always knew who was in the crew.
Yeah.
And I'd always get invited up to the flight deck. Or the captain would stand there in the doorway and he'd say to me, are you going to turn left or right? left is where the flight deck was, and right is where I would have sat in my normal seat.
You mentioned like front and back, where there are like two classes, like business first class, and was there economy on Concorde or not really?
It was intended to be that way.
Yeah.
When there was a lot of people going to buy Concorde, the options. But when the petrol rationing came out in the 70s, they didn't because of the cost.
Yeah.
So then the other airlines realized there was 40 first class and 60 first class, because there was no business class. It was first economy then.
Yeah. Okay.
So there were 60 seats that was going to go back and forth across the Atlantic 4 times. That was 240 seats at an economy fare. That was going to rip it off from all the other airlines, because why would you sit on a normal airplane for 7 or 8 hours when you could sit on Concorde for 3 or 3.25 hours for the same fare?
Oh, was it the same price? Was it not more expensive than the 747?
No, it wasn't to start with. It was an economy fare.
Okay.
So the other airlines decided this is not on. So what happened was it became one class, R class, and the fare was 20% surcharge above first class. But then it depended where you buy your ticket. I could buy my ticket in Nairobi, and with the currency exchange, I could get the Concorde surcharge between London, New York, and back again for $400.
Wow.
The upgrade at $400, which was about just about £300 at the time, 150 quid on, but each way to ride on Concorde was pretty good.
So there were tricks as well how to get it a bit cheaper than normal.
Absolutely.
Okay. You have flown 15 million miles in your life, probably more than anybody else.
Yeah.
Did you basically live on airplanes, and how did
Pretty
you
much
cope with it? I mean,
yes, I did. I used to fly 11 months a year. This is why it's not the best thing you can do for a marriage. I'll tell you that right away. It's screwed up 2 of my marriages. Yeah, but it's what I did. I think I was injected with aviation fuel, really. Okay. I enjoy what I did. It was fantastic for me. And I made friends all over the world. And I still work with those friends, especially down in Kenya.
Yeah.
I've known people there for 40 years, and I have my own little safari that I've taken Richard Branson and family on, Prince, the royalties, and normal people. I auction it off at charity.
Okay.
And I've made about £1.5 million with it for kids. Yeah. So it's important. What
kind of status did you have at British Airways at that time? You were probably their most lucrative client.
Yeah, I was. I used from Roy Watts, going back into the 70s, and then Colin Marshall. I had a letter from them, and I'll give you a copy of it.
Okay.
It was this is to introduce Mr. Fred Finn. He's our most traveled person on Concorde. He's done so many flights. Please give him anything that he requests, because there was no points and stuff then as such. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was good.
Okay. Wow. Amazing.
But it got to the time on my PNR, it would put most valued account, most traveled person.
In your book, Sonic Boom, you were talking as well about other airlines that you flew once in a while. And as my viewers are Germany-based, of course,
sure.
I would like to know what your perception of Lufthansa was at that time and nowadays.
Lufthansa is a great airline. I tell you what, I was on a Pan American flight that it was overloaded from London, Frankfurt to Nairobi. I had an invite ticket, which was probably worth no money to anybody from Kenya. Anyway, we missed the connection in Frankfurt. Mm-hmm. So I'm talking to Mr. Lehman. I can always remember his name. He was the manager at the airport in Frankfurt. He said, "You're 2 of you, Mr. Finn and your colleague, yes? Well, I've got your 2 first-class seats on Lufthansa. They're absolutely free of charge. Thank you for flying with Lufthansa." So my vision of Lufthansa is fantastic.
Of course.
I also did a program for Allianz in Munich not long ago about my travel.
Mm-hmm.
And I was taken to the Lufthansa Premier Lounge.
Yeah.
And where they have that
Was it the
blue label champagne. Oh, it was. It had the bedrooms in it.
Okay, yeah, that's probably the first class lounge in Munich then.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And the lady that showed us was a communications director, so she took me to the bedrooms, and I asked her cheekily, "Well, where's the blonde?" But we got a nice. The champagne they served in that lounge was fantastic, and they kept putting me in front of a Lufthansa tailplane. Lufthansa is a great airline. No, they're very good.
Right. Did you hear that from somebody who's from outside?
They're still very good.
Yeah, I must say so too. Most of the cases, not all of frequent travelers in Germany are happy because Lufthansa delayed its modernization, but now with the new cabin Allegris, which they have been announcing for 7 years,
the new cabin is very good.
But you're right. Most of the time, service is very good, and they're very, very nice.
It runs with Teutonic timing, on time, most mainly.
Yeah. As an Air Miles millionaire, what are your top 3 recommendations for frequent travelers today? What lessons should we learn from you?
Well, first off, I suppose you should start with what you're packing. Very important. I get offered suitcases to try out, and I was given a Tumi case, which was about £1,500 a case. It was made out of this like stuff they make the racing cars out of today, the carbon fiber, square corners, but it weighed 6 kilos before I put anything in it. Now, it might have been the champagne, but to me, it's not as important because I get decent allowance. But there are people that have to pay for 15 or 23 or 32 kilos. If you've got 6 kilos, or if it's over a certain weight, you get hammered at the airport. So no, I've used all my life.
Light luggage, okay, so that doesn't weigh much. Is there anything else you would recommend to frequent travelers who want to collect miles, or anything else that you would say, like, if you want to get a good status, what would you recommend? Is there anything?
Well, I think I'm not really sure. All I know is to turn up in time for the airport and give you time to get through. Be earlier through check-in and security than late, because they don't come and find you anymore if you're stuck in the line. That's true. It's a shame to miss your flight because you're stuck in security. So turn up early. Don't drink too much before you get on the flight, because you might find yourself not on the flight. It's very, a lot of people, especially if they're a bit frightened of flying, they'll drink too much. Then I suppose you have to watch. I mean, I don't chase points.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't need to, because you were at first class. You had first class tickets all the time, so that's.
Yeah, but I also fly in the back. I still do, because how can you be talking about it if you haven't used it? And I'm Oliver. If I haven't used it, I won't talk about it. It's as easy as that, because I don't have the skills to do that. So I always make sure that I know where I'm sitting on my aircraft. I know when I'm boarding the aircraft. I know when to get it to the gate. Okay. It's always best to do things not in a rush.
Yeah, that's
what they call the pierhead jump. Is not good for your heart.
Okay. My last question, Fred. Most travelers are keen on getting an upgrade. Do you have any plans for that? I mean, I've seen a nice chapter in your book. So what are your top 3 recommendations in order to get an upgrade to business or even first?
Well, first off, do the crew the respect they do you. Dress properly.
Yeah.
When I first started flying on Pan Am, you wouldn't get on the flight if you weren't dressed properly, even if you paid for it. First class, no way. Yeah. So dress properly, not in showing off shorts with holes in it and no socks and shoes on it, So dress properly and be polite. Don't assume anything. I mean, if I want an upgrade, there's 2 ways you can ask on the ground. And if they say no, you can say, if you're looking for upgrades today, I'd like to volunteer.
That's
it works. But on board, I would say to the crew, I tried to buy a business class seat or a first class seat. There was none showing available, so I'm stuck with this ticket. Is there a seat, and could you oblige me? and they say, leave it with us and we'll tell you, and we'll come and get you. And they do. But it depends strictly on how you ask.
Yeah, I think so too.
It does. And if you've got some, I mean, if it's your first trip and you're sitting in the back of the bus and you go up and say, I'd like to sit up the front, I think you'll get nowhere real quick. But if you've got some acquiescence about flying and they can understand, you're sympathetic to them.
Then
I mean, I get on board and I'm obviously, I probably know someone.
Okay.
Especially, I ask them how they are to start with. I don't ask for an upgrade. I ask them how they are.
Yeah.
And they say, where are you sitting? How did that happen? Come here, we'll get you a better seat. They know when I'm saying how they are. I don't mention the word upgrade. Yeah. The best thing you say is leave it unsaid and let them offer it to you. And they will if you're decent.
Yeah. Fred, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. That was really delightful and very, very interesting. To my followers, your book, Sonic Boom, is really a must read. I will put the link into my description so they can see it. And yeah, have a great time flying. Thank you again for everything, and hopefully see you soon somewhere in the world.